Hello and welcome to the Stringer Podcast number 14. 014 if you're in the tri-digit mood. Yeah, got nothing there. Armen Bedakian on this week's pod from The Score, formerly of MLSsoccer.com. The last of those three older interviews that I said we're trying to wrap up before we get into some new stuff next week. At Armen Bedakian on Twitter, at Armen Bedakian on Instagram. Clever way of spelling it, if you ask me. But before we get to that, let's look ahead to the weekend. What do you got going on? This is what we're doing. Friday night, Booze Clues. Clever naming, right? 11 p.m. at Bad Dog Comedy Theater, 875 Bloor Street West. You know what? Honestly, I can't word this any better than they wrote it themselves. Help a group of friends piece together their night of drunken chaos in this improvised comedy show. You decide what happens. We deal with the consequences. Yep. Can't do it better than that. Check out baddogtheater.com for details. Saturday night, Simpsons Trivia Night, 7 p.m. at Meltdown Esports Bar, 686 College Street. Watch 3 episodes of the show, 1 round of trivia per episode. Fantastic prizes up for grabs. But come on, with all of our favorite Springfield classic cocktail, Flaming Moe's, being offered up, aren't we all winners? I thought so. Sunday, March 11th, Nada Surf is at Horseshoe Tavern. Let me say it again. Nada Surf is at Horseshoe Tavern. Hello 1996. Being thrown into trash cans, left off recess sports rosters, and still blaring popular in my Sony Walkman because anti-skip on that Panasonic Discman just wasn't there yet, man. I actually want to get a crew out to this. That's how excited I am. I don't want to say worshipped these. That's really creepy. I didn't worship them. But that song, popular, played over and over and over, and I'm hoping they play it for us at the Horseshoe Tavern. Sunday, March 11th, 8 p.m., 370 Queen Street West. Please remember that if you have an event coming up, anything you want promoted, hit us up on Twitter at Stringer Podcast or email us podcast@thestringers.com. That's Stringers with a Z because we're Canadian and we don't want to do the S. Cool? Cool. Armen Bedakian coming up. Really excited to talk to this guy. Well, I was really excited when I talked to him. Really excited to share this with you. But you know what? Nada Surf is at the Horseshoe. No. Take us to the podcast.
There comes a time in everyone's life when you just really got to ask yourself sometimes to ask yourself, should be steady? To be going steady? Don't faint it away. But I honestly believe that one month should be enough. Well, first of all, let's say you do your name, Johnny. And one day Johnny asks me to see the steady time. Decide to
3 important rules for breaking up.
Never mind. Was it really? Where do you end up parking?
There's a building up on Dundas with like an in-park built in, so I just dipped in there and then I paid the, what's it called? $11 or whatever it was.
Dude, the street is way cheaper.
Except it's you're not allowed to between 4 and 6.
Only on the northbound. Southbound you can. On the other side of the street you can.
That's alright. That's all good.
Perils of driving in the city.
I don't drive very often.
No?
Yeah, just a couple times, but only when there's like 4 to 12 shifts at work and I'm like the last go training taking me home.
Where's home?
Pickering.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know you came in from Pickering.
Well, I was in North York today, so it wasn't too bad, yeah.
Chilling or?
My dad has a garage there. Yeah, he's a mechanic.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
No way.
My dad and my mom work together.
What was your mom?
She does like the front office stuff.
Yeah.
And my dad fixes cars.
No way.
Yeah.
That's sick.
Yeah.
Ever since you were a kid?
Yeah.
Has he always had a garage?
Oh yeah, even before I was born.
Yeah?
Yeah. Except this new one's like, or not new anymore, but this one is 8 or 9 years now. So you had another one before that.
In North York as well, or somewhere else?
This one was in Scarborough. Yeah.
And you're a Pickering kid?
Yeah, I grew up in Pickering. Well, I grew
all
up in
along.
Scarborough first, and then I moved to Pickering when I was in grade 4.
10 years old?
Yeah.
About that? Huh.
Big yard and public school or Catholic school, just kind of fun.
Catholic school, yeah.
Good times.
Crazy. Armen Bedakian on the podcast. We're recording already. It's a decent start. Just the way to do it, because there's not a series of questions. It's not a hardcore interview. It's more of a conversation. And so we just kind of start the conversation in one spot and see where it goes. Interestingly enough, in high school, I worked, so my father was in the automotive industry. Mm-hmm. And in high school, I worked in a garage for 5 years. And I thought that's the road I was going to go down. And I worked, when I started writing, actually, when I was 18, when I was first published, it was in the automotive industry. I thought for sure I was going to stick with automotive. And that lasted, I think, until I was 19. And that's when I shifted over. Was there ever any pressure for you to like carry on the family business and stay in mechanics?
Not me, but my younger brother, he helps out my dad. So he's working with her too right now. I told my dad I wanted to be a journalist when I was like maybe grade 11, grade 12. Mm-hmm. And he told me, okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to call yourself a journalist. You're going to go do it. And if you are just going to call yourself a journalist, then that's not okay. So he sort of kicked my butt into it. And he was just like, you can do whatever you want to do, but you got to do it.
Blue collar attitude.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So
that you got to get down to work.
Started writing for free, started writing for magazines, just anywhere that would take me. At one point I had like 11 outlets they were just taking my like freelance pieces. Yeah. And I think maybe at the end of the month I'd make $100 between them. Yeah. So it was like the hustle. That's the hustle.
The hustle. Your dad, is he like a specialist mechanic in the sense that he only sticks with one vehicle, or he really specializes in one part of the vehicle, like engine work or alternators or something like that?
No, man, he does everything. There's literally nothing that man can't fix.
Really?
Like, not even just in cars, anything. Household electrical work, like he's like, yeah, I can do it. And he could literally build a house with his two hands if you give him the materials for it.
So your dad was always from Canada?
No, he was born in Syria, in Aleppo. He came to Canada because he wanted a better life. And he wanted to, I think first he landed in Montreal, and then he quickly came to Toronto. And then my mom had family in Toronto as well, so she was visiting, and they were just like, the older relatives were just like, oh, you should meet this boy. And then they were telling him, oh, you should meet this girl. And they just didn't do it. They just never met. And then the second time my mom came by, they finally met up or whatever. And they started talking on the phone when she was back in Venezuela. And within 3 or 4 months, they were engaged. And they've been married for 25 years now.
Do you have any family in Montreal?
Yes, I do. I have some family in Montreal.
I love Montreal. Yeah. So for anyone outside of Canada, for at least a Toronto boy growing up, I grew up about an hour north of the city. When you're 18, we do a pilgrimage to Montreal because Quebec, the drinking age, is 18, wherein at least in Ontario, I don't know everyone's drinking age, at least in Ontario, it's 19. So at 18 is your first chance to really fall in love with Montreal because you get to drink there legally.
Yeah, I've only ever been to Montreal 3 or 4 times, and I think the last time was when I was 15 or 16.
You haven't even done your 18-year-old pilgrimage?
I was busy, man.
Armen!
I was busy trying to conquer Toronto. No, but every experience I've ever had in Montreal was traumatic and awful.
Really?
Yeah, I've never had a good experience. The first time I went to Montreal, I think we were lost trying to find an address for like an hour and a half, and I was miserable in the car. The second time I went, I must have been 8 or 9 years old. I found these incredible like Pokemon figures or whatever. And I was like ecstatic because it was like Mewtwo and like the really cool ones that I've never seen in Toronto. So I bought them and I'm like, all right, Montreal has been redeemed. And then I lost them within like a day or two. And
while you're in Montreal still?
Yes. And I convinced myself that someone had stolen my treasures. Like it wasn't that I just lost them at a McDonald's or whatever. Yeah. It was just that some guy from Montreal decided I'm going to steal that kid's toys.
Just to mess with you.
The third time I went down, we were staying with like a cousin, and they had this awful cat. Like it was a cat from like Satan's personal collection, and it attacked us at every, like we would literally just go to the kitchen to get a drink of water, and it would like claw at us. And eventually, at one point, my brother was like not looking. He was sitting down somewhere doing something, and this cat was on a ledge behind him, and then he just scratches the back of my brother's head, and like
Demon cat.
yeah, put bandages on him and stuff. It was awful.
I grew up with a bunch of cats, had a dog as well, but sometimes they get you, and it doesn't even matter the animal. Sometimes you guys, you're just on the same page. It's almost like humans. You guys vibe really well, and other times they're just out to mess you up. Like they just want to screw with you, like this cat who decides he wants to attack your brother just for the sake of scratching him down the back of the neck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never had a dog or a cat growing up. My godmother had a dog though, so it was sort of like we grew up with him. His name was Teddy. And, yeah, I mean, he was the coolest dog of all time and not a problem with him at all. What I grew up with actually was weird, man. I had some weird pets growing up. I had a crawfish. I had a frog named Sir Jumps a Lot. I had a piranha that was like at least a foot long, just living in an aquarium. We bought them when they were 2 and they were small. And then one of them must have killed the other one. And then this one just like took over the territory. And, man, I remember it was Thanksgiving Day, maybe 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And like a week before, this fish had just flipped upside down. Like it was living in the aquarium all its life, and it just suddenly was upside down. But it was still swimming. It was
alive.
Yeah, it was alive. It was just
living
down.
life the other way.
Yeah, it just decided, I guess I'm going to start
so
living upside
trippy.
down. And then on Thanksgiving Day, we're sitting down, we're having dinner, turkeys out and everything. And we just hear like this thrashing in the other room. We're just like, what's going on here? And my dad goes to check, and my fish of 10 years, my piranha of 10 years, decided that was the day that he's going to kick the bucket. So,
Poor guy. What was his name? What was the piranha's name?
we actually never named him.
The first cat I remember having, there was 3 boys, and we each were able to give him a name. So the cat's name was Newton Milo Scruff Hansler. Each of the 3 boys got to give him a name. I obviously, giant nerd, called him Newton because, hey, why not? Sir Isaac Newton, I guess, was my hero at the time. But because he had 3 names, he actually had no names, and he was Cat for his whole life. It was the simplest, and people thought we were ridiculous because we tell them, they're like, what's your cat's name? We're like, oh, it's Newton Milo Scruff, but we just call him Cat.
I like it.
So Pickering, Scarborough first, then Pickering.
Yeah.
And you would have been in Pickering when you're like, I think I want to be a journalist.
Yeah, it was right there. Actually, I didn't even want to just be a journalist. My primary motivation at the time was to actually get into TFC games. That was my big thing. Like, I remember being a kid, falling in love with TFC. I was at like someone's house, and the first game was against Chivas USA of all time, I think.
Yeah, you're right. In Chivas.
Yeah, and I was watching this game, and I thought it was Mexican soccer. Like MLS wasn't even like a thing in my mind. So I'm sitting there watching this team, and it's TOR or TFC or whatever, and I'm like, is this Toronto? Like, do we have a team? I didn't even know that. But I'm watching this guy, Jimmy Brennan. I'm watching these players, and I'm just like, all right, I can get into this. So I go home, do a little bit of research. And I'm like, all right, I'm down.
I'm sold. Team. I'm signed up.
At this point, I'm watching Kaká play for AC Milan, and I'm kind of starting to like Chelsea a little. But Toronto, I'm like, yeah, Toronto, that's my team. So quickly, obsession grew. By the time Danny Dichio scores his first goal, I'm all in. Like, I'm invested. But I'm like, 13 at this point? I don't even remember.
And thankfully, first of all, you had like 7 weeks or 8 weeks between that first game against Chivas and when Danny Dichio scored that first goal. Yeah. You had a bit of time to grow your base of knowledge there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was the first tough lesson, which was that sometimes you got to wait for stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it was hard to go as a 13-year-old because my dad's working, and it's tough to kind of like put together even $80 for a ticket or whatever it was, like I had to use my allowance. I was delivering newspapers at the time, and that was like where I would be able to even get my ticket. So around the age of 14, 15, I started realizing like I'm too in love with this team to only go 3 or 4 times a season. Like I got to start going regularly. How am I going to get in through the door? And again, season tickets at this time, like the fever was high at this time still. So
you're like, how can I do this?
How do I get in
for free?
And so
how can I not pay for a ticket yet still have a really good seat?
Simultaneously, I'm finding that I'm really happy with like writing, and a lot of people are telling me I'm decent at it and pretty good at it. Like I'm doing well at writers craft classes and stuff. So it's at this point where I'm starting to think I'm putting one and one together. I'm like, all right, if I can get myself a media pass, I can go to these games. And if I can go to these games, I can practice my writing, and maybe I can put like a sports, like journalism twist on this writing. And, you know, maybe I could write like a sports book, or like try to be a sports journalist, try to be a soccer writer. So I think my first big break was Red Nation Online, which is run by an incredible group of guys.
Is that SB Nation, part of the SB Nation group? No?
It's a solo group. It's
Okay.
run by a guy named Steve Botcher, Ian Clark, and Rick Evangelista. And these three guys, man, they gave me my first shot. They like took me in under their wing, basically said, whatever you want to write. And man, looking back at some of those articles, they were very generous with me.
What was your target in the early days? Were you doing game review, like recaps or previews, or did you have general subjects like fandom of football in Toronto?
The first kind of thing that I did before I even got the pass to go to the actual games was this like regular post-match like kind of feature thing called Good, Bad, and Ugly. And it's just straight up like what was good, what was bad, and what was ugly about the game. But that was like sort of my signature sort of feature. And that's what I used to do at the end of every single game. And it also gave me a very good excuse to watch these games, because I'm just like, yo, I'm not just watching it. Like I'm doing something afterwards. So that was like the first kind of thing. And I would also just do a lot of opinion stuff. Like I remember, I think the first thing I wrote was on Maicon Santos. I think that was like the first article that I got published. From there, from Red Nation, I got a job I got a freelance gig with Soccer 360 magazine. And from there, it was just like every sort of 3 or 4 months, I would pick up something new, get to some other place, and eventually ended up at MLSsoccer.com. So that was like the big break. And then from there, it's just been...
The digital world has really opened it up, especially now. Actually, I say this there's two sides of the story. It's really opened it up for writers, because I was first published in the more traditional sense in a magazine. But as you said, at any given point, you could be juggling a ton of different outlets. And that's really what online has given us, where there's like tiers of outlets, in the sense that you have still your big ones, the ones that have either a print affiliation or still a print issue. But then you have regular, we think of The Athletic, that's, out and functioning right now, where it operates in what was a quote unquote print fashion, but only in a digital landscape. And then you have a bunch of top tier bloggers, and you mentioned the three guys that gave you your break, and a group of others. And then you have another tier of bloggers under that, where they run sites. And then you get into a little more of the fandom sites under that. But at any given point for a writer, if you want to write, there's spots for you to put your stuff. And worst case scenario, it's not like 30 years ago, you could, if you wanted to write, you could just publish your own newspaper. Right now, you could create your own blog. You have all the opportunity in the world. And I would only imagine that helps you really hone the craft even quicker, because you're able to write on several different subjects and kind of fine tune the way you write, whether it's opinion pieces or, quippy, attention grabbing click through pieces, or recaps or previews.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always took it as a series of steps. That was always like my mentality was, this is where you are right now, and don't rush it, because where you are right now, you need to do something, learn something, and get somewhere before you can get to the next step. So like that tier that you mentioned, I knew that like, it's unlikely, no matter how good you think you are, no matter what like kind of content you're coming up with, no one's going to give you a shot if you don't kind of go through the grind first. So yeah, I did start on like the sort of fan blog level, and then I did kind of get that break, and the magazine was more of like a traditional print kind of thing. But even then, in like the grand scheme of things, soccer magazines are not necessarily like the same thing as like Time Magazine, National Geographic. So it's always that tiered kind of step. And then my ultimate motivation was build a good name for yourself, build a kind of a reputation for doing good work, and see where that takes you. And I think when I started writing for MLS, that was like when it became real. And it was always just like, well, I'm kind of a soccer writer, but like maybe this isn't going to happen. But when I started writing at MLS, it was like, all right, so this is like your thing now. Like you can do this. And at that point, it was like 100% about get as good a story as you can, no matter what the story is, no matter what like you got to do to get it, just get it. And again, like I said, you learn your lessons along the way. Like when I was writing for MLS, I thought that I was doing some pretty like good work, but I realize now in retrospect, like looking back, like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. Like I was looking out only for me. And in the end of the day, like if you're not wary of the relationships that you're building with the people around you, if you're like a dumb, selfish 18-year-old kid going after just for yourself, you're going to burn out. You got to focus on the people around you as well. So I made that mistake, man. I live with that regret every day. Like I wish I could go back to those days and be like, Armen, listen, man, look, you can get a scoop on a big story, but if the player, for example, that you're talking to doesn't want that out yet, you're going to hurt that guy. Or if you're not wary of the people around you, yeah, you might get that scoop, but at what cost, you know? It's that balance. And that's kind of the thing that I really struggled with. And that was a hard lesson to learn because I learned it by making those mistakes a lot.
You brought up so many good points there, so many. But the point on relationship building is so important, and I am still learning how important that is. We're always searching for the best story, but there are so many incredible stories, as you said, that could damage the people involved. And a valuable lesson I learned with actually one of my previous producers who was above me, and he's now moved on to a different role. He said, we're not saving lives. And actually, I believe his father was a doctor, in which case he had a really good perspective on what saving lives meant. But he said, we're not saving lives. We're in the entertainment industry. And it's true. Thankfully, I'm very thankful. We don't have the responsibility on us to have to report on those kinds of things, but we get to present people with an escape. We get to show them a side of life that allows them to forget about perhaps, you know, the stresses of earning enough to pay the rent, or, you know, what the immigration policy for the US is going to be. And we get to help them through that. And so the relationships we build on both sides, both with the subject, right? So we get to work with them and create this long history with them, because you never know where that leads in the future. If you've known someone 20, 30, 40 years, I think like it's not been that long, but I think of my relationship with someone like Dwayne De Rosario, who has spanned over a decade now, and how I've been able to work with him, but also then the people you work with, you know, or the people in the, you know, in the industry with you, because you have to know this by now. It's such a small industry that you're crossing paths with people all the time. Even if they move on to a job in New York, you still end up seeing them 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of the struggle, because it's hard. And to the point of the escapism of this, the entertainment factor of this, I don't want to take away from like the journalistic ethics that you actually have to maintain. Because if a story was being told, my primary motivation was to serve a reader what the truth is. But at the same time, soccer is, I love this quote because, and I'm not sure who said it, but soccer is the least important thing in the world. That's the beauty of it. It's, in the end of the day, soccer is a huge escape for so many people, like billions of people around the world. And that's kind of the beautiful part of it. I mean, people take it seriously because it's a part of their lifestyle. So I never want to like take away from that, you know, because it is serious. People do care about their clubs. People do care about the things that are going around. But at the same time, you sort of understand, like, in the end of the day, these are men kicking a ball around, women kicking a ball around, and whether the goal goes in or not, life will go on for all of the fans, for all the people, and especially for the players. I mean, these are human beings. These are people who have their own families, their own lives.
Toronto, though, I believe is a pretty good city for people of celebrity status to kind of go about their life without so much hassle.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've seen some crazy things. I think of TIFF as it comes in and out, and I've seen swarms of photographers outside hotels. But outside of that 1 week, there's tons of like major entertainment celebrities that pass through the city seemingly unnoticed, and you might hear that they were at this place for dinner or in that area of town or at this bar. But I think Toronto, you can agree or disagree. I think Toronto's a pretty good spot for that.
Yeah, Toronto's a kind of a weird city because like it's so big, it's so like fulfilling, but we still have this like sort of small town mentality where if like someone like name drops Toronto in a song or whatever, we're like, hey,
We're super excited about it.
Like, hey, they mentioned us. Like, yeah, we're like the third or fourth biggest city in North America. Like
third population wise, I think behind LA and New York, right? If you want to include Mexico, then we're fourth because it's LA, New York, Mexico City. And then second land area wise, only behind LA. I'm a friggin' nerd. I love dropping those stats. Yeah. It's that same thing you said. This is my version of hearing Toronto in a song.
Right.
Someone says Toronto's big, right? And I'm like, let me tell you how big it is. It's massive in North America. Bigger than Boston, bigger than Chicago, bigger than Dallas, Fort Worth area.
Yeah. And plus, what do those guys have? I mean, we got stuff. We got all kinds of cool stuff. We got everything. We got a little.
Exactly. We have a little bit of every culture.
Yeah.
I think what happens, we have this dichotomy that exists in personality with on one side how multicultural it is, and so someone of any walk of life you can come across on the street, like whether it's nationality or religious background or lifestyle preference or whatever. We have become fairly accustomed to seeing them at some point of our week or something, because we can come across them so easily just in day to day because we're such a multicultural city. But on the flip side of it, we're still Canadian. And what are the things Canadians are known for? We're excessively polite. We're kind of quiet into ourselves. We don't beat our chest too much outside of hockey. We kind of keep to ourselves and are happy being our own little bubble. And I think that comes from having the U.S. as a big brother all the time. Yeah. And so that helped develop that quietness. And so you mix that with multiculturalism, and we can come across anyone in the street of whatever status or celebrity, and it's just kind of normal and cool, and we're not going to bug them.
I have a theory about why Canada is polite and why Canada is a little more reserved, a little more quiet.
Ooh, I'd like to hear this.
I have this theory that it really comes down to the weather.
Oh, interesting.
I think the fact that it gets so cold here that you can actually die by being outside tempers people. I think having that healthy fear of like your world being capable of ending you, as morbid as that sounds, I think that kind of puts a lot of things in perspective. And I think this is why the happiest countries in the world are also among the coldest. I mean, you look at the Scandinavian countries, Sweden and Denmark and Norway and all them. Those guys always rank among the happiest, most like well-developed like lifestyles and this and this and that. I think it's a healthy fear of death from the outside. And you don't see that in places like southern parts of the United States. I mean, you could see
I don't know.
Outside.
California is pretty chill.
California's pretty chill, but
it's pretty chill.
But it's also an outlier to the rest of the southern part of the United States.
You're right. Yeah, completely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just spouting nonsense, but I feel like
it's a good theory. I like it.
Environment can like literally
kill you.
Yeah.
That just existing outside can kill you.
Yep.
Makes us nice people.
Yeah.
Because we're just appreciative. We're appreciative of every day that we get.
Yeah, basically.
Because it could end at any point.
I think it's subconscious. I don't think that people are actively going like, oh man, it's snowing today, I'm going to die. But I think the fact that you always sort of have to take precautions, and it's not even just that. I also feel like because it's such a collective thing, it's not an individual experience. I mean, this is things that like everybody around you is experiencing. Like when it snows really badly, it's not just your commute. It's not just your day that's been ruined. It's everybody's. It's everybody around you. And so I think that has a very kind of tempering effect on any sort of like heated passion. But I also think that because it's sort of a shared misery, that everybody can sort of go like, all right, let's just try to not be dicks to each other.
November seems to be that turning point where life goes from awesome, it's fall and I have all these great sweaters I get to wear, to fuck you, it sucks. I'm trying to kill you with my sleet and my snow and my freezing rain and all the ways you can die. just scraping your car off in the morning.
Yeah. And then your scraper breaks and your key doesn't unlock the door because the lock is frozen, and you just sort of look at yourself like, why are any of us here?
Why are we doing this to ourselves?
Here?
We could probably create a list of gimmicky contraptions from Canadian Tire that have tried to combat like the cold weather. I think of key warmers. Ooh. Right, to warm your key so it can get through the ice on the door.
I need one of those.
There's like those mitts scrapers, right, where it's this really, it looks like an oven mitt with a scraper on the end.
Wow.
For your windshield. Automatic car starters, or that's not gimmicky, man. That's basically necessity up here. I feel Canadian Tire has cornered the market with shit we don't think we need, but they make us want it.
I think the one winter invention that I don't know.
You can't live without.
Can't live without are gloves with like the fingertips that let you use your phone.
Oh, see, you can tell what generation you're from.
No,
because I can't be bothered with that crap.
No, you know how hard it is to like do winter, like just live a normal life if you have to take your gloves off and like just a text and then put your phone in your pocket and then feel the vibration and you're like, oh, come on.
You see, that's why I use my commute to unplug. I don't have to look at my phone because I can't touch it because I don't want to take my gloves off. But it's true I don't know what they call it. They have a word for it though that gives you the ability to touch your screen on your iPhone.
Yeah.
With those fancy gloves.
That was a game changer.
We went through a whole whack of the different outlets which you wrote for and where that kind of plugged into the timeline. But what about schooling? Where did your schooling fit in and where did you go to school? You were in the city, right?
Yeah. I went to Ryerson for journalism.
Oh, bring it on, Ryerson.
Yeah. I was
great programs. Tons of people come out of Ryerson in the sports industry.
A lot of people actually. And some of the people that are working right now, like a lot of the people that were in sports, when I went to school there, like we were kind of interested in it. They're all working now. So that's really kind of encouraging to see. I'm actually working with another person who is in my graduating year. She works on the basketball desk. Her name is Victoria. So we both ended up at the...
Shout out Victoria.
Shout out to Victoria.
What's her last name?
I think Wynn.
Follow her on Twitter.
Yeah. She's on the basketball desk. But like, yeah, a lot of people that I went to Ryerson with are at different sports outlets now. But yeah, I never really considered other schools. I applied to Ryerson for journalism, and I also applied to U of T for journalism. And I had a really strong portfolio, so I got my acceptance like right off the bat. Like I didn't have to waitlist.
Don't brag or anything.
No,
no. Whoa.
No,
I'm just saying I had a really, really strong portfolio.
Yeah,
like I'm pretty impressive.
I'm going to take credit for it. I did have a
as you should
decently strong portfolio, and so the acceptance was from Ryerson first. Like it just came in the first wave, I suppose, because it came in before the other one did, and right away, I just accepted it that very day. Like I logged in, and I was like, whatever. And then whatever U of T says, it's fine. So the U of T one came back. I was accepted that too, but it was never really a choice. I
interesting. You're all Ryerson all the way.
Yeah, and it was literally just a case of I love Toronto, so like going to Ryerson was just like the one kind of most attractive option because it's like right there. You know, Yonge and Dundas. You're literally right in the thick of it, and that was like the best I think decision I could have made. Not even just for the fact that it was where it was and like kind of the location and the experience, but the classes were all really strong. I felt like doing a journalism degree straight up was hugely advantageous. And especially because I didn't focus too much on the writing parts. Like I didn't take much of the writing classes. I was like, all right, I'm doing all right on the writing stuff. Like I got to write, like I took a couple on the first couple of years just because I had to, but I was like, all right, if I'm here, I'm going to try to become like more well-rounded. So I really focused on TV production, video editing, and then photo editing. So by the end of those 4 years, I was pretty solid at like Premiere Pro and Photoshop and that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of big experience that I took out of Ryerson. But the funny thing is, and I don't know if I should be upset about it or not, but I finished my 4-year journalism degree program. And the year that I finished, Ryerson launched its sports media program.
Oh, no way.
And I'm just sitting there going like, man.
God damn it. I was this close.
Yeah, it was
this close.
In months. Like I don't know. It's all right. I think doing journalism is probably a better option anyways. It probably got a better kind of more useful education out of it. But you walk through like the Mattamy Athletic Center where I think most of the classrooms are, and you're just like inundated with like this incredible sports media culture. Like I was walking through it and I was being given a tour of it in my last week, I think. And I'm sitting there going like, man, how did this happen?
It's dope. But you know what? And this is just my personal opinion, and I'm sure people can crap on me for disagreeing. But you can have a general journalistic mindset and degree and background and experience and schooling and apply it to sports or to anything. Because with a journalism degree, you could decide, when you get to be my age, listen to me here, young Armen, when you get to be my age, you could decide that, hey, I want to take on a new challenge.
Yeah.
Right? That I want the adrenaline of like ambulance chasing or something like that. And you never lose that. Where sports, you kind of end up handcuffing yourself in just to one thing. But it doesn't mean that your degree doesn't already definitely apply to sports and allow you, obviously, to get where you are today as a sports writer. Where did your schooling fit in with your secular opportunities? Like, you were still in school when you were with MLS, weren't you?
Yeah, I was in my third year of university, second semester, and I was just in the middle of a classroom, and I got an email from Simon Borg saying, "Hey, Armen, got your name from a couple people that we know in Toronto. We're having this opening for the Toronto FC beat writer. What do you think? Would you want it?" And I'm sitting in the middle of a lecture going like, "Oh man, like, is this really happening right now?" I'm freaking out. So I step out immediately. I'm just like, "Yes, please. I would like this job. This is my dream. Yes," is my answer. So it was kind of always in the middle of it. I've always been the kind of person that thought like school should never be your primary form of education. It should sort of help guide you along the way, but you should always try to learn from your life, from doing things, from experiencing things. So for me, my schooling was always sort of second to the work. And maybe, I don't know, my grades were pretty solid, but I could have done better if I had applied myself primarily to that education. But it was just always a matter of prioritizing. In the end of the day, it was like, I would skip classes to go to training. And I remember being in the middle of a reporting sports lecture with Sean FitzGerald, who's like one of Toronto's best sports reporters. And that's like the chance of a lifetime for an education right there, just from talking to the guy. And Jermain Defoe was sold. And I'm sitting there going, and this is like 8 o'clock at night. And I'm like,
I remember that day.
I'm like, all right. So I can't even be here right now. I gotta go. So I put my hand up and Sean's like, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm like, "But I gotta go." Sean, I'm so sorry. I ran out of the classroom, got in front of a computer and I started writing it up, and I'm just like, all right, just doing the report, whatever. And I think even that night, TFC had sent out like a press release or whatever, or it was like a invite for the like press conference for the next day. So it was already sort of like dropping and everybody had like the reports. So, I mean, I did that more times than I think I would like to admit, just skipping lectures, like dipping out of class in the middle of it, just to go take care of something.
Fitzy's a good dude.
Yeah.
If you ever get a chance just to like go for coffee or beer with him, he's cool. And he's like from that, I kind of call it the golden age of reporting. We don't always see eye to eye in what he chooses to write about, but I appreciate the fact that he's a very talented writer, and he's been employed for a very long time. Yeah,
he earned my admiration for life when he was my prof for that class. I had submitted a TFC. I don't know if it was a TFC story. I think it was a Ryerson athletic story. I'd submitted as my first assignment. I was pretty confident, and I'm like, I'm a sports writer. I've been doing this for a little bit. Like, this is for me is like a bird course. And then he sent it back with like a 70 on it. And he's just like, this is lacking. You need to fix this. You need to fix this. You need to fix this. And I'm just like, whoa, all right. Like, I got to take a step back, look at this again and be like, all right, you can't get cocky. You can never get too confident in this. I think the second you start seeing yourself as like infallible is when you start to like really fail. And he immediately put me in my place, and he was like, all right, yeah, you have a little bit of whatever going for you, but like, you're still a kid.
You're still a kid. You have lots to learn.
A lot of lumps to take. So I'm like, all right, I took it. And the next assignment, I was like, all right, I'm going to show him. I'm going to show him what I got. And I'm going to show him the best I can do. I submitted a TFC story and it came back with like an 83. And I'm sitting there going like,
It's better.
It's better, but
It's
like I was going for 100. And in the end of the day, man, like people like Sean FitzGerald, they'll look out for you because they know that even if they're a little critical, you can take it and that you'll learn from it, you'll grow from it. And I'll always appreciate that. He didn't treat me with like kid gloves. He just gave it to me.
I have a theory that people in creative roles actually are more thirsty for criticism than they are really for praise, because every time someone's like, oh, I really like that thing you did or that show you worked on or whatever, I'm like, yeah, thanks. You know, I just, in my head, they either don't, and this seems mean, but it's not meant to be mean, they either don't know enough to see the cracks in it and the faults in it, or they're just trying to be nice, in which case doesn't help me either. The truth is they truly connected to the piece and they really liked it, but I believe we have this thirst in us for criticism so that we can grow. And that's the reason we don't want to beat ourselves down, but we want to know what can we do better, because I know I can still get better and I can still keep going.
I think the role of criticism, especially for a journalist, is incredibly important, because we have, like, the craft itself is basically putting your thoughts, your words onto paper and then sharing it to the world. That can make you feel very vulnerable. And being able to deal with that criticism from whoever it's from is very important. I mean, it's so easy to get discouraged. It's so easy to like do something wrong, like seriously mess something up and decide like, I can't do this anymore, because people will call you out for it, especially if you're like lucky enough that I'm in soccer, that if I make a huge mistake, it's not like a world ending mistake. It's just kind of in the scope of a sport. But if you're working a hard news desk and you mess something up, like in a bad way, dude, I can't even imagine what that like gut wrenching, that heart sinking feeling is like. But you know what? You learn from it, man. Like, you need a tough skin in this industry, and in whatever beat you're working on, you need that tough skin, because without it, I mean, it's really easy to fall into sort of traps and get really down on yourself. I mean, being a journalist is a lot of inner thought before you actually put anything onto a page. And so I think even for me, even for myself personally, like there have been days where I was like thinking to myself, like, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? Like, I could work for some insurance company and plug numbers into a computer and like
make twice as much.
Well,
let's be honest.
I mean, I don't know. Like, there are days where you're just like, why? But then there's that, then when you're at that point, something will happen. I've always known it. Like, I'm very much open to like the whims of the universe, you know, where I'm just like, all right, if this is where I am right now, just accept that this is where I am right now, and we'll see what happens. You know, there's like the beauty of the impermanent. I like to call it, like, even if you're down, this isn't going to be you forever. Something's going to come your way. And
you never know how things are working out in the background. Mm-hmm. Like, we have such a narrow focus perspective on today that we never truly appreciate until a ton of time has passed, that we're able to look back and say to ourselves, oh my goodness, you know, here I was worried about A, but D, E, and F were all kind of stewing and working, or because I didn't get A, or I didn't get to achieve A, it then forced me to get creative, which then led me down this road, which then brought me to where I am today. And, you know, I think of myself in that sense because I never wanted to be a documentary producer. Fuck that. I never thought of it ever, never, until it was kind of like, well, I'm a writer, and then I'm a reporter, and then I'm this, and then I'm that, and then I don't like people telling me what to say anymore, so I want to create the story myself. Well, how do I do that? Well, I have to learn how to use a camera. I'll do that, fine. And then before you know it, you're chasing down some other weird path, and that goes to exactly what you're saying. You don't know. It's the impermanent, mm-hmm. right? It's the fact that everything can change. I do want to touch on a point though that you brought up about criticism and having to have a tough skin, because Armen, are you trying to tell me that in a digital age where everyone has a voice and everyone can reach your articles, you don't have 100% support? You mean there's people on the internet that dedicate some of their time to maybe not disproving what you said, but just shitting on it?
Yeah.
No. The internet?
The internet has a very weird way of letting you know that you suck sometimes.
The internet I think the internet hates everybody all the time. Like 60% of the internet hates everybody all the time. And then you get your moments where it likes you, but then it's just going to hate you again tomorrow.
That's the thing, man. Just don't chase it. I was always told that in journalism school too. Just don't read the comments. You do your thing. That's why I like Kelly so much, because he just deactivated his Twitter account. He's like, I don't need this. I'm just going to do me. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, no matter what you do, you're never going to be able to please everybody 100% of the time. If you figure that secret out, you'll make it huge in this industry.
You can't please. No one's figured that out.
Yeah.
I'm stupid. That's what I say all the time. Someone's like, you screwed this up. I'm like, I'm stupid. It's okay. Whatever.
It's a good coping mechanism.
Right? It's just like, we all make mistakes. I'm stupid. You're stupid too.
I do get hung up on them though. I do have that thing where I eat away at myself. Like, it's such little dumb things. Like at the score, the worst one we do is like mess up alerts. Like if there's a typo in the alert and that goes out, you'll feel it for the rest of the week. Like that's one of those ones where you're like, man, what am I doing with my life? I remember, actually I got a funny story for you. I was, it must have been maybe 6 or 7 months into my tenure at the score. This was maybe 3 years ago. And,
has it been 3 years already?
Almost. I think it's been 2.5.
Holy smokes, time flies.
Yeah. So, I was, just about 6 or 7 months into my tenure at the score, and I messed up an alert. I think it was an alert or a headline. Either way, there was a typo. And, I went down to, it was like near the end of the day. So that's when I was sort of told like, hey, this was messed up. We got to be a little bit more diligent and hardworking, whatever. And I was like, all right, this is the worst. So I went down, there's like a Spanish restaurant right on King and Spadina, like called Patria. So I went down there, and I love paella. Like that's like my favorite thing in the world. So I was just sitting there going like, it was one of those days where you really doubt yourself and your abilities or whatever. And you're just like, man, why am I doing this? Like that was the dumbest thing. Why did I make that mistake? Like I think I misspelled Zidane's first name or something. And I was just like, what's wrong with me? I got to be more careful. Got to take it more slow. Like why am I rushing? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm just sitting there looking at these chefs making like paella, and they have like this open kitchen concept thing. And I'm just watching it. I'm just like, dude, like you could literally just like, you're 23 at this point or whatever. You're like, just quit, move to Spain, move to Valencia, learn how to do this, and then come back, open a Spanish restaurant or whatever. Like your whole life can change in a heartbeat. If all you literally have to do is take your phone out, plug in Expedia.ca or whatever it is, and buy a ticket to Spain, and your whole life changes. You know what I mean? Like your whole life can change. And I'm just sitting there in this restaurant going like, what's going on in my mind right now? Like, do I want to be a chef? Do I want to be a Spanish chef? Like, is that what my brain is telling me right now? Or is it just like sort of a reflective period where you're just like, there's, I don't know.
You're dealing with that idea of failure. And it's very, very small. I'm not trying to blow it out of proportion here, but that's what you're kind of coping with. You're like, oh, dang it, I messed up. Mm-hmm. How do I deal with this?
Again, the same sort of feeling when Seattle beat Toronto, and I made sure that before I went into the Toronto locker room, I just went into the Seattle locker room, because I had a pretty good relationship with Stephen Fry, because he was around when I was still kind of coming through. So he was a rookie. I think it was still kind of a rookie in that locker room, if a journalist can be a rookie. And I remember like walking up to him afterwards, and just in the locker room, everyone's celebrating, and they got the MLS Cup, and we did an interview, and he told me like he felt bad for Toronto, obviously, but he's celebrating his successes. And I was really happy for him, genuinely. But I started thinking to myself, I'm like, man, like it's so strange how like I'm a beat reporter on the TFC beat right now. If my circumstances in life were different, such that my parents had decided to move to Seattle and I had taken the same path, I'd be in this locker room right now celebrating with the team that I've been covering for like the last 3 or 4 years. And it's just like, sometimes you can't really control your circumstance. Sometimes you can't really control that fate. But there's such like this beautiful thing of like the duality of it all, you know? Like one person can be so heartbroken, one person can just be so jubilant, and then you have a guy like Stephen Fry who's right in the middle of it, and he's seen both. And it's just like, I don't know, man, like there are days where I genuinely think to myself, I'm like, you could literally just fly somewhere, pick a random place in the world, and I guarantee you in a year, your life will be completely different. And there's such a beauty in that. I just wish that there was like a way of maybe more logistically facilitating that.
There's a pause. If there's a life pause button.
Yeah.
I think we need a life pause button where I don't have to lose my job or my condo, but I can go gain life experience somewhere and decide at the end of it, do I want to be a different person or do I want to be that old person again?
I feel like that would be so
beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in between high school and university, or in between university and starting a job or whatever, there should be like some sort of program that's like kicks you out of your comfort zone completely. Just like drops you in the middle of like a country where you have no idea what's going on. And my brother actually spent a year in Rome teaching English. So like I'm super jealous of that experience. Like I'm not even going to lie about it. But I went to visit him right as he was coming back. And you could tell, man, like he changed a lot, but it was also really hard. You know, it's not easy. And that's sort of the thing. It's like, yeah, you could go and try to be a chef, learn in Spain and bring back the greatest paella recipe of all time. But it's going to be so hard. And like, you're going to lose everything here just to go do that. You know, it's that next step that's really hard to take.
Before we go, I always say it's not a sports podcast, but you've brought up now that night in December a couple times. What do you remember just from that night, just from that experience of being like the atmosphere or whatever? What do you take away when you look back to that picture on your wall of BMO Field? What do you remember from it? What do you take away from that experience?
Man, that was a brutal night. I'd already been at the score and I'd stopped going to the games, and that was really hard for me because like I felt like so much of my identity was tied to like covering TFC. So I remember going back to BMO Field, going back to that press kind of core and thinking to myself like, you're stepping into the final and you missed the whole journey, and that sucks. Like I wish I could have been there for that. Like that's like that whole, like seeing that whole season progress. So there was a sort of bittersweet element to it. It was also freezing cold. Like it was.
That's what I remember.
It was stupid.
It was stupid cold. It was Canada cold.
Yeah.
It was the weather wants to kill you cold.
That was, and I'm surprised the players, like there were some players who weren't wearing gloves, and I'm just like, guys, geez, and no one was wearing short sleeves, thankfully. But man, I mean, it was bad. That was one of the worst, I think, soccer like experiences. Definitely, I remember it just like being so surreal because I knew that like. At any given point, I knew that one goal would have changed that game. Whoever scored that goal would have won it. There was not going to be like a lot of drama. And it was so obvious from like the half-hour mark that this is going to be a really cagey match. And I also remember the second, everyone talks about the save on by Stephen Fry and how that was like the big moment. And yeah, sure it was. But I remember before that, like 5 minutes before that, we hit a post or something. And right there I said, yeah, it's not happening. Like this is going to end right there. And I think I even turned to Anthony Totera, and I was like, Anthony, it's not happening, but it's not going to happen. And when we went to penalties, I was like, I knew it was already done.
Armen, we're going to have to do this again.
Yes.
Because we ran out of time. Like, we went our time, and I still have more to talk about, but we're going to have to pick it up another time. Thank you so much. We do end things. So the whole mantra is basically people treating themselves well. And I think that kind of came through in our conversation because it's about we spoke about overcoming our own hiccups and our own mental like vices and traps that we set for ourselves. So I end every podcast, I say, be good to yourself and eat your vegetables. So I'm going to say the first half if you want to say the second half.
All right, let's do it.
So everyone, Armen, thank you so much for the time. Your time, and everyone, please be good to yourself
and eat your vegetables.
Yes, it worked. Love it.